Once you make these ramen noodles at home, you'll never want to buy from the store again. They're easy to make and just incredibly delicious. Hey guys, I have a really great video for you today. So in the last few months, I've been obsessed with making pasta, Asian noodles, and ramen noodles from scratch at home. I've scoured the internet to find the best recipes. I've tried maybe 20 or 30 different variations, low hydration, high hydrations, learning all the terms, but I think I may have found my absolute favorite one. It's easy to do, it doesn't take all day, barely any kneading required, and honestly, it comes out incredible. Now I'm going to keep this video as simple in layman's terms as possible so anyone watching can understand what the heck I'm talking about. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump into it. So the first thing to know is that ramen noodles are a bit different than your normal Asian noodles. They have that little signature chewiness to them. That comes from an alkaline solution. And without going into any detail at all, what we're going to need to make that signature chewiness is baking soda. That's right, I said it, baking soda. So go ahead and get baking soda and turn your oven on to 250 degrees Fahrenheit. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be baking the baking soda. And we're going to call it exactly that, baked baking soda. It's going to reduce in weight by probably about a third. So what's going on? Baking soda is also known as sodium bicarbonate, which means that there's sodium and 2 carbons. By baking it, we're actually turning it into sodium carbonate. So we're actually getting rid of one of the sodiums. Sodium carbonate is a strong alkaline salt, which ramen noodles need to have that infamous springy texture. So to make baked baking soda, real simple. Get a tray, line it with aluminum foil, and pour over some baking soda. Get it in the oven for about an hour on 250, and that's it. Now when it comes out of the oven, let it cool down. And make sure now to wear gloves because that stuff can really burn your skin. You're only going to be needing about a teaspoon for this recipe, so the rest you can go ahead and put it in a bag, seal it nicely for use later on. Now, if you do have contact with your skin, don't panic, just wash it very, very well. Have you ever used baked baking soda before? Let me know in the comment section down below. What do you think about that? Is it strange? Now that the baked baking soda is out of the way, let's get down to making our ramen. Now you're gonna think that I'm being difficult, but there's a few critical things that you'll need to make ramen noodles. The first one is a bowl. The second one is a pasta machine roller. And the third one, a rolling pin. If you have those 3, you're ready to go. So I'll leave a link in the description down below for the pasta machine roller that I use, just as a reference for you guys. Now here is where it's important. Ramen is all about ratios. You got 1 part flour, 40% of the flour weight for water. So if you have 100 grams of flour, you got 40 grams of water, 1% baked baking soda, and 1% salt. And now in terms of measurements for this recipe, we're going to be going with 700 grams of flour, 280 grams of water, 7 grams of sodium carbonate or the baked baking soda, and 7 grams of sea salt. The flour you can add into your bowl directly, and now in a separate jar have the water. Dissolve carefully that baked baking soda and the salt. Make sure to be careful. You really don't want that stuff getting on your skin. It may burn a bit. And once that's dissolved, we're going to start incorporating the water into the flour. And we're going to be doing this really slowly, actually 1 or 2 tablespoons at a time. The reason we want to go slowly is so that as much of the flour can be hydrated. If you pour it all at once, one spot will clump up and the rest will end up being unhydrated completely. So we add in a tablespoon or 2 and then we mix. And we add in another tablespoon or 2 and we mix again. It may take some time, but trust me, this is going to save you a lot of effort instead of kneading it on later. Low hydration means it's very hard to knead. So do this slowly, do it right. It will help you in the long run. Trust me. And if you're not so keen to doing this whole thing by hand and really taking too much time, stick around until the end. In the pro tips and tricks section, I'm going to be sharing a way that will expedite this whole process like crazy. All right, the incorporation should take you about 5 minutes. And now you can use your hands. We're going to want to toss and break apart the big chunks of flour. We want to make sure everything is well hydrated. So if there's any little pieces that have not touched any part of the water, we want them incorporated. How do you know you've done it right or you've done it enough? It should all be able to squeeze together if you try, but we want it broken apart, so break it apart. Now get it in a Ziploc bag, seal it as tight as possible, try to get as much of the air out as possible, and let it rest for 30 minutes to up to an hour. And while you're waiting, come on, let's be honest, you got some time on your hand. Go ahead and give this video a ramen-y thumbs up. Go ahead, click it, let's go. Thanks so much. And while you're at it, you might as well subscribe. We only have good content on this channel. Like, check out this recipe. Incredible fresh pasta. Trust me, you're not gonna get better than that. 30 minutes passed, we're gonna now wanna flatten out the dough within the bag. Now I gotta give credit to Way of Ramen for this incredible tip, flattening it out at the 30-minute mark. It really helps. He likes to step on the bag to flatten it out. Personally, I don't want my feet anywhere near my food, so I use my arms, but it's a great, great, great technique. Now that you've flattened it out, leave it for another 30 minutes to rest a bit more. The 30-minute timer is done. It's time for the next step. Separate your dough into portion parts. We're gonna be flattening out and working with each one individually, and the remainder ones we wanna leave in the bag. The one that you're using, you wanna spray a little bit of tapioca starch on top or cornstarch on top, and you wanna flatten it just enough so that it can go through the widest setting on your pasta roller. We're gonna roll it through the pasta machine on the widest setting once. Then we're gonna fold it onto itself. We're gonna roll it through again, and we're gonna fold it again. And then we're gonna roll it through again, 3, 4, 5 times. Every time you roll it, you're strengthening that gluten bond. And the stronger it is, the better your ramen will come out. So this is the kneading process for ramen noodles. Folding it and rolling it through, folding it and rolling it through. Like I mentioned, 4 to 5 times, and then you lower the setting by 1, roll it through, and you wanna keep going until you get about this thick, 3 millimeters or so. Then put it through the spaghetti cutter, and you have ramen noodles. Looking good. Oh man, I'm so excited to taste this. Cut and separate as proportion size, roll it into itself, and leave it on the side and continue with the rest of your ramen pasta. So to recap the steps, flatten so it's thick enough to go through the widest setting on your machine, roll it through the machine on the widest setting, fold it on itself, roll it again, fold it on itself, roll it again. Do that 4 to 5 times. Then go down in the settings slowly, slowly until you get to the 3rd or 4th largest setting. This is your preference. And then roll it through the cutter. Separate into portion size, and there you go. Just keep going until it's all done. Now look at those end results. Those are a nice bunch of portion sizes that look really quite incredible. Now the final step, get them into the fridge for 2 days before using. And after the 2 days, you have one of 2 options. 1, go ahead and cook it right away. Or option B, freeze them for later. Just get them into the freezer on a tray, let them freeze completely, and then put them into a freezer bag, and you can keep them for at least 2-3 months even. And the cooking step is real easy. You boil water, you throw them in, 90 seconds, they're done. That's it. You have yourself some homemade ramen noodles made by you at home, and boy are they delicious. So now we know how to make the ramen noodles. Let's jump right ahead into the pro tips and tricks section to learn a bit more. Tip and trick number 1, use a stand mixer. If you have one, it's gonna make your life way easier. All you gotta do is use the mixer while incorporating the water very, very slowly. Instead of doing this by hand, it'll save you a lot of energy, a lot of forearm muscle pain. Trust me, the stand mixer will help you. And if you're gonna make a big batch, the stand mixer is critical. Now personally, I like to do things by hand. I like to test things out and see and feel them myself, but the stand mixer is a great tool, and the next time I'm making them, I'm using it. Tip number 2, flatten out the dough after the first rest in the bag. Instead of taking it out and flattening it and putting it back in the bag, flatten it in the bag. It's much, much easier. It'll be easier to manipulate later on. And for cutting purposes and separating it, it's way, way simpler. Also, it avoids you having to roll out a big chunk like this yourself. Tip number 3, and this one is an important one. Roll out your portion size before getting it in the pasta machine roller. The dough is very, very dense. It will break your machine. Trust me, roll it out before. I'm begging you guys. Tip number 4, machine roll out your dough many, many times. Now I touched upon this in the video, but here's the real reason why. On the widest setting, roll through fold on itself, roll through, fold on itself. Remember that part? So this is the equivalent of kneading for ramen noodles. The process of running it through the machine multiple times creates a gluten network through the process of kneading. And running the dough sheets through the machine repeatedly in the same direction aligns the gluten network in straight lines that run the length of the dough and the length of the noodle, which results in that distinctive ramen bite when you're biting through that noodle. How do you know the kneading is done? When you see those long lines. Okay, tip number 5, letting it rest after kneading. So once you've rolled it out on the larger setting, you can get it back in the bag or cover it with saran wrap and let it rest for another 30 minutes. This is actually what I learned on my last trial. It helps that gluten network to rest a bit so that when you're rolling it through on thinner settings, it doesn't fight back against you as much. Okay guys, 2 more tips. Tip number 6, don't go too thin. It's actually better not to pass the level 3 on your pasta machine. This isn't angel hair pasta or spaghetti. This is ramen noodles. You want them to be a little bit thicker. When they're too thin, they don't become enjoyable. My recommendation, stop at the 4th largest setting on your pasta machine, whatever that is. And finally, tip number 7, freeze extra portions. Separate them on a tray, put them in the freezer, let them freeze, and then put them in separate freezer bags. Get as much of that air out as possible, and they will last for months in the freezer, ready to enjoy fresh ramen noodles whenever you want. Guys, that's all I have for this video. Let me know how I did and how you like this one in the comment section down below. As always, if you haven't already, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell while you're at it. When you subscribe to this channel, you're subscribing to get great and authentic recipes, classic and tested ways of cooking them, and everything 100% kosher. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next one.